Hello everyone, and welcome back once again to Cozy Reads. I hope you've all been keeping well. Thank you for joining me again for another story. In today's story, we'll carry on with the tale of Regalion. This time of respite has brought the group some much needed normalcy after the deadly battles they were in. With Bree shopping while Max and Hector clean themselves up, they all get a chance to reflect. Reflect on what has happened and reflect on what is to come. Let's see how our heroes fare during this downtime. She was thinking so much that she didn't realise she had instinctively put her hands on her shoulders to try and cover herself and warm herself up. The moment she realised this, she also realised how cold it was, and the fact that she was walking around in a top. She checked how much money she had, and surmised that she would have enough to get herself a coat or a jumper as well. But first things first, she needed to find a clothes shop that could sell what she needed. After some walking around, she found a little boutique on a street corner. It looked inconspicuous enough, but not busy, so the perfect place. She went in and was immediately greeted with glances from some of the other shoppers. She didn't realise how dead the street was until she saw the people in the shop, which then made her notice why people were glancing over at her. While yes, she was the one that was looking the least worse for wear out of the group, she still looked like she had spent a night outdoors with no camping gear and no change of clothes. And she smelled a bit too, for good measure. Well, I'm here now, and these people don't know what I've been through, so I'm going to hold my head high and just walk on by, she thought to herself. Hi there, do you need any help? A store employee chirped up with no warning, completely surprising Bree. Bree could hear the questionable tone that the shop employee had used, as if she was trying to offer good customer service and not be rude. But just like everyone else in the store, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling she was getting from Bree. Bree quickly turned to look at the employee. She was an average-sized girl who looked younger than Bree. She seemed to be most likely 17 or 18 years old. She wore a black outfit, a black top tucked into black jeans and black shoes, most likely the store's uniform for their employees. Her hair was chestnut brown and tied in a ponytail, and she wore very light makeup. Bree could tell just from her appearance alone that she was probably someone who valued her job. And as such, the tone of her voice when she addressed Bree was probably born out of shock than any malicious intent. The same could not be said for her co-worker, who seemed to be the only other floor employee aside from the individual behind the till. The other co-worker was a guy who had been glaring at Bree from the moment she came into the store. His shirt was untucked and his hair was unkempt. He wore a similar outfit to his female counterpart aside from the fact that his jeans were a darker shade of blue with chains hanging from them, as well as a chain that he wore around his neck. It seemed like he was trying to keep up appearances, even at work, where he had a standard uniform. However, Bree thought that maybe she was wrong, and all black attire was not a standard uniform of the store, but simply a happy coincidence. She looked at the girl's name tag, which was meticulously pinned on the left side of her shirt. It read Gracie. Thank you, Gracie, but I think I should be okay. I'm merely looking for the coats and jumpers, as I'm on a camping trip with my friends and we are kind of underprepared, Bree said, before letting out a slight laugh. She tried to keep it as natural as possible. She usually finds it weird when a customer addresses an employee by name, but she thought maybe, in this circumstance, it might help in making the situation less awkward. She studied Gracie's expression, looking for any breaks or shows of relief. And a moment came and a little slight sigh of relief that Gracie let out upon hearing what Bree had said, before proceeding to say, yeah, camping can be annoying when you're underpacked. Me and my family go camping a few times a year and I cannot tell you how many times we've forgotten to pack enough warm clothes. I can show you to our coats and jumpers section if you like, Gracie explained while motioning to a certain section of the store. Bree mentally let out a sigh of relief, before following Gracie, but not before passing and catching a glance at the male employee who was still glaring at her. She hoped that he would not be a problem. As Bree looked over the clothes for something that would fit them all, she felt a presence behind her. It was a male employee gazing at the back of her. She thought he was glaring out of annoyance or disgust at how ragged she looked, but she realised that she had completely got it wrong when she heard him say, "You know, such a lady as yourself should not be travelling alone. If you need a hand or someone to buy you dinner, I know a few good places to get a bite to eat." Bree felt her stomach churn a bit at this. Not because the guy himself, but because of the situation. She looked and smelled like she had spent the night sleeping outside. The guy stared at her the whole time she was in the store, and he was an employee at the store made evident by his name tag. Yet he decided that now would be the best time to try and hit her up without even engaging in at least some form of conversation. And the way he said it, he came across as someone who partakes too much in the act of seduction, that he copies everything that the so-called love gurus and pickup artists teach. He wanted to sound so cool, but he came across as weird and a little desperate. But she realised that was not completely his fault. If he'd simply engaged in some conversation first, or just acted as an employee and discovered what she was looking for and why, then she might have been more engaging. Gracie was able to do that with one simple question, and by just doing her job. However, Bree didn't want to jump to any conclusions or completely shut him down. She thought to herself that she would pretend that he had spoken to her as a regular customer and respond as such. "Thank you, but I'm merely looking for a coat that fits my friends as well as myself, and maybe a jumper too." Bree responded before going back to check the sizes of the coats in a bid to find one that fit Hector. That was when she noticed the male employee's arm, Scott was his name, reach out and grab a cream fur coat that seemed to be Bree's size. I think you would look simply exquisite in this, like a beautifully painted picture or a model showing off the next line of clothes. I mean, you're already beautiful, but this would fill you out. In fact, I can show you where the new tees are if you wanted to change that manky t-shirt of yours. Trust me, you'll like these, and they would accentuate your figure well," he replied while eyeing Bree up and down. She felt as though he was a predator, eyeing his next meal, and now he was crossing lines. But she held her cool and said, "Thanks for the compliment and the advice, but I won't be needing the help," before taking the coat from him and putting it back on the shelf. However, this did not stop him from asking her when he saw her get a massive coat for Hector. "Oh, well, that's definitely not yours. It would completely hide your figure, and no one wants that. Oh, also, have you thought about my dinner proposal yet?" he asked. Thanks, but this is not for me. It's for one of my male camping friends. He's a big guy, so I need a much bigger coat. And I'm not too sure if it's appropriate to ask customers out on dates, especially when you hardly know them. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I would have to thankfully decline, I'm afraid. I have way too much going on right now, and I only came here to get coats and jumpers. Thank you for the offer though. Immediately, as Bree mentioned Hector, she saw Scott's face shift. And once she had finished her sentence, he started his tirade. "You girls are all the same. Why didn't you just tell me that you already had a boyfriend? Gosh, I would have left you alone. It was a pity date offer anyway. I mean, look at you. You look and smell like you've been out on the streets for weeks. Damn, if you need any help, don't come to me. I only help polite and endearing customers." He then stormed off and went to the back of the shop. Bree just shook her head and smiled. She had way too much going on, and way too much self-worth to care about what some idiot of a guy said. Once she had everything she needed, she went to the till, where she was greeted by the final employee, who turned out to be the store manager. Tony was his name. "Was everything to your liking? Were you able to find everything that you needed?" he asked. Bree responded, "Yeah, it was all fine. I was able to find everything that I needed. Gracie was a massive help in that respect. But your other employee was a bit much. I'm not too sure if I struck a chord with him, and if I did, then I apologize, but he seemed to get a bit pissed off during our encounter." Tony shook his head upon hearing this and apologized to Bree before saying, "Did he ask you out?" "He tends to do that. He's my cousin, and I've told him 1,000,001 times to stop harassing customers. But his parents own this boutique, so it gets a little complicated. Again, I'm sorry. I gave him one more chance to not harass customers, but it seems he broke that. I'll make sure that he's reprimanded for his actions," Tony said before loading up the store camera system on his phone. "Thank you. I'm not looking to get anyone into trouble, but I just thought I might bring it to your attention, especially if he's a repeat offender," Bree responded. Tony then told her that she had no reason to apologize. Scott's behavior was unacceptable, and after talking a bit more to Tony, Bree said her goodbyes and left the boutique. She smiled as she left, thinking that no matter how far-fetched the world is becoming, human nature is still always a prominent aspect of who we are. As Bree walked the nearly empty streets, now wearing the clothes that she had bought, she wondered to herself what type of lives everyone leads. For example, the people whom she had met at the boutique. What does Gracie do when she gets home? She seemed like a nice enough girl, and probably someone who's building experience or savings, or she generally likes retail. And what about someone like Scott? He seemed like the type of guy that would go home and realise how lonely his life is, but then brag about his quote-unquote amazing life to his friends. She carried on walking until she felt a sudden pang in her stomach. She realised she was starving, and so decided now would be a good time to grab some food and start to make her way back. She wandered around looking for a good place to buy food when she managed to run into a small cafe. She looked like she had just gone on a shopping spree, and she carried carrier bags with the change of clothes for Hector. While they were mainly for Hector due to his size of clothes, they inflated the bags, and she had bought a few things for Max just in case. "Hi there, what can I get you?" said the chirpy cafe employee. I'm just looking around for now, thanks though," Bree answered. The employee told her no problem and left her to carry on looking over the menu. Bree started to ponder what would be best to get. None of them had eaten in a while, and with the encounters and strenuous activity that they have all gotten involved with, she knew that she would need to get something warm, filling but easily transportable. As she looked over the menu, she thought about Max and Hector, and hoped that they were getting along alright. A couple of hours had passed, and Max and Hector had managed to get themselves cleaned up and were in the process of waiting for Bree to come back. What's taking her so long? She's only going to buy clothes and food. It shouldn't take her this long, Hector mumbled while surveying the area. Max chuckled and told him to be patient. She'll arrive soon. He also reminded Hector that due to the spot they chose, it wasn't a quick trip to town, so the journey back might take a bit of time too. To be fair, this reminds me of a story from my earlier days as a Reaper, back when I first met Scarlet. If you put us side by side, you would never guess that we would end up becoming the best of friends, Max started. As he said this, he looked off into the distance, as his mind wandered back to when he and Scarlet first met. It sounds like a touching story, but I couldn't care less, Hector replied while turning away. "Ah, come on, Hector," Max said. "We might as well use this time to get to know each other. And what better way to do that than to pass the time by telling each other stories?" Hector grumbled but turned around anyway. Max could tell that he was probably interested enough to hear the story, or at the very least, it was better than just sitting there waiting for the time to pass. "Perfect," Max said. "So, this story is basically from my early days as a Reaper. I'd taken over my own Reaper Corps. While it sounds like it would be an intense situation, we had been trained for these moments, with the training that team leaders underwent being the most intense. We were taught to be the best of the best, and that was what I was trained to become. Now, I went out on my first assignment as a Reaper team leader. The job was a search and rescue, as a team had gone out on a mission but they had not returned, so we were sent to find them. Long story short, we ended up in a cave, as the team was last seen in that location, and upon entering the cave we were greeted with an interesting sight. The Reapers were in a standoff with a group of bandits. Both groups were looking worse for wear, barely able to stand, but the group leader for the Reapers screamed a war charge before running headfirst into the bandits. We were in utter shock as she cleaved through bandit after bandit. She was panting and heaving, but she kept going until she was stopped by the bandit leader, who was able to knock her back, disarming her as he readied his attack. All this happened in about 2 minutes, so that was our cue to jump in. Me and my group charged at the remaining bandits, finishing them off and scaring them away. This got the leader's attention, who turned his blade on us. We were able to overpower him, and then I sent my team in to clean up and help the other team out the cave. After this, me and the other team leader had a sit down, where we spoke about various things. She told me that her name was Scarlet, and she felt she had not much else to live for, which is why she was so reckless. She didn't tell me the reason at the time, why she felt as though there was nothing to live for, and this was something that she struggled with for a while. Over time our friendship grew, and she opened up more and more to me, but our relationship was not without its issues. At this, Max seemed to trail off and stare into the distance deep in thought. Hector sat and thought about Max's story. However, they did not have too long to stew, because Bree came walking through the clearing, clothes and food in hand. With this, the trio cleaned themselves up and rested for a bit before making their way to salvation. And that brings chapter 21 of this story to an end. Hope you've all been enjoying this series so far. With the crew rested, fed and slightly patched up, they can now make their way to a proper doctor. One who could at least make sure they were ready for what was to come. As we've seen, even with all the danger of the Reapers, Damon and Godforsaken, the world still keeps spinning and people still keep living their lives. Shopping is still the same, and stories are still told amongst people getting to know each other. And that's why our heroes fight, so that people like the clothing store workers can keep living their quiet lives. So stay tuned to see if our heroes have what it takes to keep the good fight going. But until then, I hope you've all sufficiently warmed up and that this story has brought you some level of comfort. I wish you safe travels on the journey of life, and feel free to come back again whenever you need a new story to warm your day.